do you love me? Jesus is asking the question, do you love me? In John chapter 1, Peter is introduced to Jesus by Andrew, his brother. Andrew's a disciple follower of John the Baptist, and Peter may well have been as well. But Andrew comes across Jesus. He's introduced to Jesus by John the Baptist, and John the Baptist reveals Christ as the Messiah. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And it's at this point then that Andrew is introduced to Jesus. So Andrew comes to Jesus first. And yet as we read through the Gospels, it's Peter that has the more prominent role. But Andrew introduces Peter to Jesus, because as Andrew is introduced to Jesus, then Andrew comes across this thing in his mind and he says, I've got to tell Peter about this. There was something that compelled Andrew to go to Peter, his brother. There was something within them. We're told in John chapter 1, he had to tell Simon Peter, his brother, about Jesus. There was something that compelled him to share the news about Jesus Christ, the Messiah. In other words, for us today, as we get saved, as we have this conversion experience, as we are introduced to Jesus, then something should compel us to tell others about what we have discovered. Something should convict us to want, to need to tell others about this Jesus that we have met. And so Andrew comes across Jesus, the Messiah. He begins to follow Jesus, and then something within him, we're told that I've got to go tell Peter about this. And so he goes to Peter and he says, Peter, this is what we've been waiting on. This is what we've been reading about in the Old Testament scriptures. The one that the prophets have been writing about, he's here. It's Jesus of Nazareth. He's the Messiah. And I'm following him. I'm going to introduce you to him, Peter. And he makes the introduction. And sometimes as Christians, that's all we've got to do. Make an introduction to Jesus. Andrew makes the introductions. And Simon, as he is known in those days, is introduced to Jesus by Andrew. And Jesus looks at him, takes one look at him and says, you're Peter. You're no longer Simon. You're Peter. Rock. I don't know how long it is, but it could be weeks, it could be months. But this is John chapter 1. In Luke chapter 5, Peter's out fishing because Peter is a fisherman. This is how he makes his livelihood. This is how he earns his living. This is something that he has been doing pretty much probably all of his life. He knows fishing inside out. This is his life. And I don't know what the period of time is between John chapter 1, between that introduction and Luke chapter 5. It could be weeks, it could be months. But Jesus is out teaching where Peter is fishing, and crowds are gathered, and Jesus is getting kind of pushed back into the water. So Jesus climbs into the boat of Peter. And this is the moment when Jesus calls Peter to follow him. And sometimes we think, I always thought, was growing up as in church and in Sunday school and things like that, there is it whenever Jesus comes to the disciples or to those who he was calling, and he ushers those words, follow me. And sometimes we get this image in our mind that that's the first time that they meet Jesus, and that they just left everything and followed this man that they had never met before. It wasn't like that. Jesus was out and about. He was teaching. He had crowds of people that were following him. And so they knew Jesus, and Peter already knew Jesus. He'd already had that introduction. Peter's in his place of work. He's making his living. He's out fishing. This is what he does day in and day out. Jesus climbs into his boat, begins to preach to the people. Peter's been out fishing and he hasn't caught anything. Take note of this, church. He hasn't caught anything. He's been struggling all night to catch fish. And so Jesus says to him, you know what, Peter? Throw your nets out over that side of the boat. And Peter's response is, I've been out all night fishing. I haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I'm going to do it. Because you say so, Because you're giving the command, because you're telling me what to do, I'm going to do it. I'm asking the question today, what is it that Jesus is asking you to do? Maybe it's been something that you've done before, but maybe now's the time. But what is it that Jesus is convicting in your heart and in your spirit for you to do? What is he asking of you? And our response should be, okay, I've done it before, it didn't work, but now, because you say so, I'm going to do it. Peter throws off the nets off to the side of the boat, and we're told about this miraculous catch of fish that is so great in number that the boat actually struggles with the weight of the fish, and he has to call his partners, James and John, to come and help them get the fish ashore. And Peter's response is, Jesus, get out of my boat. That's his response. In that moment, Peter recognizes, I'm in the presence of a holy man. I'm in the presence of a holy God, and I can't be me, Peter, the person that I am, cannot be in the same boat and cannot be in the presence of a holy God. Get out of my boat, Jesus. You can't be in the same boat as me. Sometimes I think that the boat can very often represent Peter's life. It can represent our life, in that Jesus climbs into our boat and wants to do life with us. But sometimes our response is, Jesus, get out of my boat. You got to leave. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not good enough. You got to leave, Jesus. You got to get out. Sometimes it's not even because of feeling unworthy. Sometimes it's, Jesus, you need to get out because I want to do my own thing. That's another story. And so Peter is developing this relationship with Jesus, and Jesus is developing this relationship with Peter. The introductions have been made. This miraculous catch of fish, Peter wasn't catching anything. He wasn't catching any fish. And yet after Jesus gets into his boat and Jesus begins to enter into his life, things begin to change in the life of Peter. And it's at this moment that Jesus tells Peter, says, no, I'm not getting out of your boat. In fact, I'm calling you to follow me. Follow me, Peter. Leave everything behind, everything that you know, everything that you have known throughout all of your life, everything that you're comfortable with, everything that you're attached to, everything that you're connected to, everything that you put your hope and your trust and your faith in, your livelihood. Leave it. Come, follow me. Peter then has a decision to make. What does he do? This is all that he's ever known. This is his comfort zone. The fishing is his comfort zone, because this is what he's used to. And he's got a decision to make. Do you leave everything that I know and follow Jesus? Or do I stick with my comfort zone? Do I stick with what I know? He's got a decision to make, and Peter chooses to leave everything behind and to follow Jesus. Becomes a disciple of Jesus, becomes one of the 12 that are called by Jesus to follow him. Not only that, he becomes one of the 3 inner circle: Peter, James, and John. Andrew met Jesus first, but Andrew's not even in the 3. I don't know how Andrew must have felt. Andrew could probably be, I introduced him to Jesus. I was here first, and yet he's the one that gets called to the side with them other 2. You know, there were 4 of us there that were fishing, and 3 of them are called, and I'm left here with the rest of these guys. This guy, Judas Iscariot, there's something not good about him, and I'm standing with him while Peter, I made the introduction. I don't know if that's maybe sometimes how we feel. I was in church first, and yet that person's doing all this stuff, and I'm left behind. I don't know. I don't know if that's how Andrew felt. Maybe Andrew was pleased for his brother. I don't know. But Peter leaves everything and he follows Jesus. He becomes one of the 3, Peter, James, and John. In Matthew 16, Jesus is with his disciples in Caesarea, and he asked the question in Caesarea Philippi, who do men say that I am? And they begin to answer the questions. Well, this is what people are saying about you, Jesus. This is who people think about. This is what people think about you. This is who they are saying. They're like saying you're Elijah, you're one of the prophets, or you're John the Baptist, or things like this here. And then Jesus saying makes it a bit more personal. Who do you say that I am? And Peter's the one that always seems to have an answer. Peter is the one that becomes very prominent within the group of 12. He becomes one of the leaders within the group of the 12 disciples. And Peter's the one that gives an answer. He's always ready to open his mouth and to give an answer. And he says, you're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God. And Jesus responds, yes, you're blessed, Peter, because it's not flesh that has unveiled this to you, but it's been my Father in heaven that has unveiled this to you. And he reassures that prophecy. You're not Simon, you're Peter. You're Peter. There's a change that has taken place within Peter's life. A significant change takes place at the introduction. But that's only the introduction. There's still more to come. There's then on the boat in Luke chapter 5, and that's the moment where he's got to make that decision. Does he stay or does he leave everything that he knows and follows Jesus? A significant transition takes place in the life of Peter at that moment. And then again in Matthew 16, he answers this question. And Jesus reissues the prophecy. You're Peter. You're a rock. Peter was always there to give an answer. And sometimes that was a good thing, and sometimes it was a bad thing. Very often Peter was left with his food in his mouth because he just messed up so many times. But yet he was prominent. He's a leader. He's a leader among the 12, and Jesus is prophesying over him. You're Peter. You're a rock. Peter spends 3.5 years with Jesus, following him, watching everything that Jesus does. He's hearing all of the sermons. He's listening to all of the teachings. He's catching up on the podcasts and on Facebook. He's logging on to Jesus.com all the time, and he's catching up on Jesus. Every day of his life is spent with Jesus. He's following him. He's seeing the miracles that are taking place firsthand. He's seeing blind eyes being opened. He's seeing deaf ears being made to hear. He's seeing the lame being made to walk. He's seeing dead people being raised to life again. This is Peter's life. What a choice he made to leave the fishing behind, to have this encounter with Jesus Christ, to follow him, and to witness all of those miracles that are taking place. Peter's the one whenever they're on the Sea of Galilee in the boat and Jesus comes walking towards them. And Peter says, if it's you, then call me out to you. Peter's the one that walks on water. Nobody else did. They're all staying in the boat, and Peter's the one that gets out of the boat and begins to walk on the water with Jesus. What a life that Peter's living. What an experience. To think that he could still have been just sitting in his boat fishing. But at that moment where Jesus says, follow me, he leaves it and has this opportunity to encounter so many amazing things in life that he never would have encountered had he have stayed in his boat, continuing on with his fishing. As time progresses, Jesus is continually reminding his disciples, I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to be taken prisoner, and this is what's going to happen to me. And at one stage, Peter calls Jesus to the side and begins to rebuke Jesus. Can you imagine Jesus and Peter's rebuking Jesus? And so he pulls Jesus to the side and he says, hey, listen, all this talk about you getting arrested, and being crucified and being put to death, it's not really good for team morale here. The rest of the guys, I can see their heads dropping. Can we just stop that, please, now? It's not going to happen, Jesus. It's not going to happen. Just forget about that. And then Jesus then rebukes Peter. Jesus then has to rebuke Peter. And this happens just after Peter stepping up and saying, you're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God. In Matthew chapter 16, just a few verses later, Jesus is then rebuking Peter. and actually then calls him Satan. Jesus' response is, "Get behind me, Satan." Matthew chapter 16, "Get behind me, Satan." And then he goes on and he begins to say, your thoughts and what is on your mind is only, it's not about God, but of man. Matthew chapter 16. You still with me? Do you love me? It's me asking, do you love me? And so Matthew chapter 16, Peter's just declared that Jesus is the Messiah. So then he's gone on and he begins to predict his death. Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but of human concerns." He's beginning to unveil something within Peter here. Sometimes, Jesus is the leader, and we've got to remember this as leaders, whatever we're called to, whatever vision that God is calling us to, whatever he has put in our hearts to accomplish and to achieve, whatever dreams and ambitions that God has given you from heaven, is that there will be other people that will want to say things, voices of negativity. "No, that can't be done," or "No, you can't do that. It's you of all people. You can't do this, you can't do that." And there will be voices of negativity. And Jesus knew this was his destiny. His destiny was the cross. And so as leaders, we've got to be so firmly fixed on what is the vision. What is the vision of the church? What is the vision of the ministry? What are we trying to achieve? What are the goals? What are the visions? What are the dreams? What are the ambitions? And we're fixed on that. If that's from heaven, if that's from God, then we remain fixed on the vision. Peter comes, and one of those moments where he puts his foot in his mouth and he's saying, "Jesus, no, you got to stop this." And so Jesus rebukes Peter. Your concerns are not of God, but of man. And then Jesus goes into this dialogue, this preaching, this sermon, saying, "Whoever wants to follow me, you've got to deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good would it be for you if you gain the whole world, yet lose your soul?" Jesus is beginning to pour out a wee bit of a thing into Peter's life. There's something there that Peter needs to deal with. Time goes on. They have the Last Supper, and again, Jesus understands what's going to happen. He's trying to share with the disciples, I'm going to be arrested, and I'm going to be put to death. And the disciples still don't get this. They still don't get it. And it comes to the Last Supper, and Jesus begins to unveil a few things with Judas Iscariot. He knows Judas Iscariot is going to betray him. And again, Jesus ushers the words, "I'm going to be arrested, and yous are going to flee. You're going to leave me." And Peter steps up, and he's like, "No, Lord." He says, "Listen," one of those moments again where he pulls him to the side. "No, Lord, listen, it's not going to happen. I'm with you." And then just so that everybody else can hear, Peter steps up and he says, "Listen, they all might leave you, but I never will." That was Peter's response. It's like whenever you're in church and you're singing the song, "I surrender all," and you really mean it. This was Peter. I surrender all. They all might leave you, Jesus, but I never will. And Jesus again responds and he says, "You know what, Peter? Before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. Peter's like, "No, Lord, never. I've got your back. You're my best friend. I've been watching you for the last 3.5 years. I've been following you. We're on a good thing here. People are following us. The crowds are following us. We're getting great attendances on a Sunday. The offerings are up. Everything's brilliant, Jesus. We're not going to ruin it now by you dying. That's not going to happen. We're not going to ruin it now by us leaving. We're on to a good thing here, Jesus." We all know the story how that Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's arrested, he's taken prisoner, and he's put on trial. We all know the story of Peter. Peter follows. He's at the door of the courtyard. He's asked the question, while Jesus is being questioned by the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin, and Peter's asked the question, you're one of the you're one of them, aren't you? You're one of the disciples. No, I don't know what you're talking about. What's described as a charcoal fire. Peter approaches the charcoal fire, warms himself up at the charcoal fire. And as he's warming himself up, again, he is asked the question, yeah, we know you. We've seen you with him. You're one of his disciples, aren't you? You've been following him. You're with him. No, not me. Peter starts to get agitated with the questions being asked to him. And again, a third time, someone comes up and asks him the question, yeah, it's definitely you. It's definitely you. You're definitely one of his disciples. At this stage, Peter becomes so irate and so angry that he begins to curse and swear at these people. It's not me. You can fill in your own blanks there. I'm not one of them. I don't know who he is. I don't know what you're talking about. It's not me. As he warms himself up at a charcoal fire. It wasn't me. It's not me. And at that moment, the rooster crows. And Peter is aware of his feeling. He's aware of what he's done. He's aware that he has betrayed his best friend. He's aware that the things that Jesus said he would do, he would actually do. And for Peter, there is now this moment of brokenness in his life. Because Peter realizes what he's done. He realizes the mistakes that he's made. He realizes the betrayal that he has dished out to his best friend, to the Messiah, to the Savior of the world, to the one who called him, to the one who watched over him, who fed him, who taught him, who showed him many things. And he's betrayed him. He's hurt him, deeply wounded his friend, his best friend. Peter's broken by what he has done. Jesus is taken, we know the story, goes through his punishment, whipped and beaten and nailed to a cross, and on that cross he dies. The disciples are gathered in a room, quite possibly the upper room where they had the Last Supper. And I can only begin to imagine what must be going through Peter's mind at this stage. I can imagine him being like unconsolable, going without food. He can't eat, he can't drink, he can't sleep. What have I done? I have denied my best friend. I betrayed my best friend. And I'm not going to get a chance to apologize. I'm not going to get a chance to put things right with him. What have I done? I can imagine Peter sitting in that corner of that room and just being unconsolable. People coming and trying to put their arm around him and trying to say, listen, Peter, it's okay. We all fled. We all fled. We all disappeared. We all left him alone. We all left him to be crucified alone. We all did it. We're all in the same boat here, Peter. And Peter being unconsolable, yeah, but I was me. I've done it. I should have known better. I said I would never leave him. I said that I'd be with him. I said in front of all you guys that yous all might leave him, but I never would, and I did leave him. I can imagine Peter just being so broken and unconsolable. Again, we know the story how that Jesus is raised from the dead on the third day. The women go to the tomb and they find the tomb empty and Jesus is no longer there, and they go to the disciples, and then the disciples, John and Peter, they're running. They come to the tomb and the tomb's empty. Again, what would be going through Peter's mind at this stage? And imagine his heart beating, not just from the running, but he's like, what's going on here? What's happening here? Because they still didn't get it. In spite of all the times that Jesus had said to them, this is what's going to happen, they still didn't get it. Even Mary thinking that she's talking to the gardener, but it's actually Jesus, and asking the question, where have you put him? Where is he? Jesus is raised from the dead. He appears to around about 400 or 500 people over a period of 40 days, revealing himself as the risen Christ, as the risen Savior, as the risen Messiah. People began to testify. This is what changed Christianity. This is the resurrection of Jesus Christ is what changed Christianity. Because all other religion, their saviors, the ones that they worship, the ones that they look to, they're all dead. But for us, Jesus is alive. That's the thing about Christianity. He's alive. We worship and we follow a risen Savior. And he appears to hundreds of people, able to say, gatherings like this here, and he stands in front of them. This is what changed people's lives. This is what changed the conviction in the hearts of people, is that they were able to see the risen Christ. And so Thomas comes into a room, and the disciples are like, we've seen him. We've seen Jesus. He's alive. And Thomas is like, well, unless I see him for myself. And so eventually Thomas sees Jesus, and Jesus' words to Thomas is, you're blessed because you've seen me and you believe. But how much more blessed are those who haven't seen me yet still believe? That's us today. And the church begins to take shape and take form because Jesus Christ is alive, but there's still the issue of Peter. Jesus has got to deal with Peter. In John chapter 21, Peter is out fishing. See, this was his go-to place. This was his fallback place. Whenever things went wrong, Peter went fishing because this was all he knew. This was his comfort zone. And I wonder today, when things go wrong in your life, where's your fallback place? Where's your run-to place? Where's your go-to place? Because for many people in church, when things go wrong, their run-to place and their go-to place is alcohol. For many people in church, when things go wrong in life, their go-to place are parties. Their go-to place is drugs. Their go-to place is relationships. Their go-to place is work. We'll just throw myself into work. Work all the hours that God sends. What is your go-to place when things go wrong in your life? Peter's was fishing. Can I recommend to you today to cut out that middleman and let it be Jesus? Let Jesus be your first port of call when things go wrong in your life, because I can guarantee you something's going to go wrong. Jesus himself prophesies, in this world we will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. So whenever we need to overcome, it's the best place to go to the person who has already overcome. Jesus, let him be your go-to place. Don't lock yourself away in your house. Things aren't looking too good. I'll just shut Jesus out. I'll shut the church out. No, let Jesus be your run-to place, your go-to place, the place that you always fall back to. Peter's was fishing. And because Peter's a leader, then the others follow him. Peter says, I'm going fishing. And the others are like, well, we'll go with you. If you're a leader in this place, where is it that you're leading people to? We got to be so careful about where we're leading people, because we can lead others into our fallback place. I'm not going to church today. I don't feel like it. I'm going to just stay in the house. Well, I'll stay with you. We'll watch God TV. That's church. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, God is with us in the midst. That's church. So we don't need to go to church on Sunday. A couple of us will hang out in church, watch God TV, and that's good enough for us. Don't let that be your fallback place. So Peter's out fishing. They're not catching anything. Remember Luke chapter 5. They're not catching anything. Jesus turns up on the shore. How's it going, boys? You caught anything yet? No. Throw your net over that side of the boat. They catch miraculous catch of fish because they haven't been catching anything. And John says it's Jesus, and they come out to shore. And Jesus is sitting on the shore, and he's got a charcoal fire on the go. Charcoal fire is specifically mentioned in the courts where Peter warmed himself. Charcoal fire is specifically mentioned as Jesus is sitting here with it on the go, and he talks about bread. He's got bread. He's about to break bread with Peter, because breaking of bread speaks of forgiveness. Peter's about to get his reinstatement. Peter's a mess. Peter's broken. So his fallback place is the fishing. And yet Jesus has to come and Jesus has to confront him because there's issues in Peter's life that need resolved. Peter needs a fresh start. They sit down by the fire and Peter and Jesus says, bring some of the fish that you've caught. They bring the fish and they cook it on the charcoal fire. And this is the moment. So many transitions that take place in our lives. The introduction to Jesus was a transition for Peter. The calling in Luke chapter 5 in the boat was a transition. The denial of Jesus in the court was a transition for Peter. And now he's about to get another. They're sitting by the fire. Haven't done everything that Peter has done. Haven't denied him, betrayed him. I don't know the man, his best friend. I don't know who you're talking about. And yet Jesus sets up a position, sets up a scenario where Peter is going to be forgiven and is going to be reinstated. They're sitting by the fire. Jesus is breaking bread. They're eating fish. Jesus turns to Peter. Do you love me, Peter? Peter's response is, yes, Lord, you know. In fact, the real question is, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord. Second time, do you love me, Peter? Yes, Lord, you know. The third time, do you love me, Peter? Yes, Lord. Now, yes, I believe that it can be in relation to the 3 times that Peter denied Jesus, but there's something more within this story, within this context. Let me finish in 5 or 10 minutes, please. The worship team can come in a few minutes. Do you love me more than these, Peter? The word that Jesus uses for love is the word agape. It's the greatest and highest form of love that anybody can have. God's love for us is agape love. It is unconditional. It is without boundary. God is so passionately in love with you today, church. Passionately in love with you. And so Jesus is asking Peter the question, do you love me? Do you agape me more than these? More than what? Nobody really knows, but it can be, what people have said is that it can be a reference to the fishing. Do you love me more than the fishing? Some people have said the translation is, do you love me more than these other disciples love me? We don't really know for certain. We don't really know for sure. But Jesus uses the word agape, and Peter responds with the word phileo. It's a brotherly love. So Peter doesn't answer the question in the right way. Jesus is saying, do you agape me? Do you love me unconditionally? Do you love me with all your heart? Do you love me this much? And Peter's response is, Lord, I love you this much. And so Jesus responds, Peter, do you love me this much? Agape. Peter's response is, Lord, I love you this much. Phileo. You see the change that has taken place in Peter, because if it had been a month or 2 months before, Peter's response would have been, yes, Lord, I surrender all. I surrender all. I agape you. I love you with all of my heart. They all might flee, but I never will, because I agape you. It's easy to come into church on a Sunday and sing, I agape you, Lord. I love you this much. But sometimes the reality is, it's this much. And Peter has now come to the realization, he's broken, he's in pieces, and he realizes, Jesus, I can only give you this much. I can phileo you. I can love you with a brotherly love. This is how far I can go. I don't think I can go that far anymore, Jesus, because of what I've done. And I realize that I'm not that person that I thought I was. I thought I was someone who could agape you before you died. This is where Peter was. I can come to church on Sunday because it's easy to sing about agape, but it's so much more difficult to actually live it out in life. And Peter has this revelation, something's broken within him, and he knows, this is all I can give. So Jesus asks him twice, do you agape me, Peter? I phileo you, Jesus. Second time, do you agape me, Peter? I phileo you, Jesus. A third time, Jesus asked the question, do you phileo me, Peter? Jesus has changed the question. Jesus comes down to where Peter is. Because Peter is honest. Jesus, this is all I can give to you. I thought I could agape you. But the truth and the reality is, worship team can come, is that this is all I can give you. This is all I can give you. Phileo. And so Jesus comes down a notch. He says, do you phileo me, Peter? Yes. Yes, I do. And each of the three responses, Jesus then gives an action that Peter must follow. To feed the lambs, to tend the sheep, to feed the sheep. You see, with love comes action. Love has to be love in action. Love cannot be just verbalized. Love is an action word. Love is a verb. Love must be put into practice. And very often we can come into church and we can sing, I surrender all. But then that requires an action. And very often then we discover that, well, okay, I surrender some. I surrender this much. I surrender this much, but all? And what Jesus is looking for is honesty, church. What can you give me? Because I'll come down and meet you where you're at if you can only be honest. The problem is that we can so very often fool ourselves, and we're the only ones that we fool. We say, yeah, I surrender all, but then the truth is, well, I love you this much, but Firelands at 8:30 at night, that's a bit too late for me. You know, can't go to starts at 8:30. No. We should do evangelism. We should be out evangelism, right? Well, evangelizing, right? Okay, well then we're going to go out on Saturday afternoon. No, I can't do my shopping on a Saturday afternoon. It's not really fitting into my schedule. We've got to pray more. We've got to get together and pray. Okay, well, then we've got a prayer meeting on Tuesday night and Saturday morning. I don't know if I can make it to that. We've got life groups on. Okay, let me get back to you with the life groups. I get pay you, Lord. But the reality is this. And Jesus is saying, can you be honest with me? Do you love me? Do you love me? I believe that love should be like, you know, Jesus could have asked any question. Could have sat around that fire, around that charcoal fire. Could have asked Peter, give me your viewpoints on the end times. Give me your viewpoints on the second coming. Jesus wasn't interested in that. What do you know about the Old Testament prophets, Peter? What do you know about Daniel? What do you know about Ezekiel? What do you know about Isaiah and Jeremiah? Let's talk about the prophets. Peter, you've messed up. So we're going to put you on a fresh start program, and we're going to put you on an 8-week course, and we're going to put you through Alpha course, and then we're going to check in with you after you've gone through that process, and we're going to see what you've learned in that process. So many questions that Jesus could have asked Peter, so many things that he could have put in place, but it was one question: do you love me, Peter? Because that's all that matters, church. I believe that that's all that matters when it comes to Jesus. Do you love him? He sits around that fire. It's a simple question. Do you love me? Because if you do, if you're honest enough, then we can work together. If you're honest enough with your answer, then we've got a future together. If you're honest enough with your answer, then there's a destiny there. And we can walk this road together. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love him? Honestly, honestly, do you love Jesus? And writing in Revelation to the churches, one of the churches that there is a letter sent to, it's the church of Ephesus. in Revelation chapter 2. And within that letter to that church, and with this I'm coming to a close, in Revelation chapter 2, to the church in Ephesus, these are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 golden lampstands. Listen to what he says. I know your deeds. This is Jesus writing to the church in Ephesus. I know your deeds. I know your hard work and your perseverance. This is all good stuff. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you've tested those who claim to be apostles, but they're not, and have found them false. You've persevered and have endured hardship for my name and have not grown weary. This is all good. There's nothing bad about this. You persevered, you've not grown weary. But yet, nevertheless, I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. Consider how far you've fallen. Repent. Get back to the first love that you had. What Jesus can say, I believe even to this church, saying, I can see everything that you're doing. You got Fresh Start that's starting. You've got an Alpha course that's starting. You've got Safe Space Cafe. You've got all of these programs and projects. I can see you're slick in the fact that whenever it comes to 11:15, you start at 11:15. I can see that you do your best in worship. I can see that you welcome people, that you're a loving church, that you do so much outreach to the community. But you don't love me. Talking to maybe individuals, I can see you play the guitar, you play the drums, you play in the worship team, you lead worship, you preach, you lead a ministry, but you don't love me. Do you love him, church? Because that's what it comes down to. Do you love him? Matthew chapter 7. I'm going to pray. Matthew chapter 7. I think it's verse 21. It's this moment where people come to Jesus. This is the end time stuff. This is when people are dead. This is whenever it's too late. And this is the church, I believe. People that are sitting in churches. Lord, we prophesied in your name. We did many miracles in your name. We performed many wonders in your name. We pastored in your name. We held prayer meetings in your name. We did evangelism in your name. We led the worship and we were in the worship team. And it was all for you, Jesus. And Jesus' response says, depart from me. I never knew you. Do you love him, church? He's asking that today. Reflect on that. Consider that. Think about that. Do you love me? Be honest. Because I can tell you now, that's what Jesus is going to base his relationship on you, is not on what you can do, but on, do you love me?